Here's what the main events had to say, Trump's surrogates.
She is some sick that Hillary Clinton, huh? What a sick son of a... The whole party, a bunch of degenerates, lowlives, Jew haters and lowlives. Every one of them.
She is the devil, whoever screamed that out. She is the Antichrist.
She's a fake, a fraud. She's a pretender. Her and her pimp handlers will destroy our country.
It's going to be pretty hard to look at us and say, you know what? Kamala Harris, she got 85 million votes because she's just so impressive. As the first Samoan, Malaysian, low IQ, former California prosecutor ever to be elected president, it was just a groundswell of popular support.
How on earth is Fox getting by without him? So then the real, the meat and potatoes of the night, Trump. He took the stage 2 hours late, and then following those men spewing hate and division and grievance and straight up racism and jokes so bad the MAGA crowd didn't laugh at them, Trump had every opportunity to pivot, right? He had a platform to say, you know what? That's not how I'm going to govern as president. Turn the temperature down, push back on the ugly rhetoric that preceded him. But he went with this instead.
But they're smart and they're vicious, and we have to defeat them. And when I say the enemy from within, the other side goes crazy, becomes a sound. Oh, how can he say? No, they've done very bad things to this country. They are indeed the enemy from within. But this is who we're fighting. The United States is now an occupied country, but it will soon be an occupied country no longer. Not going to be happening. Not going to be happening. November 5th, 2024, 9 days from now, will be Liberation Day in America. It's going to be Liberation Day. On day one, I will launch the largest deportation program in American history.
The guy who couldn't get COVID tests across town is going to launch the largest deportation. Yeah. Even if you like that stuff, why do you think he could actually do it? And make no mistake, going with hate as a closing argument is his choice. It's Chris LaCivita's choice, Susie Wells, the people associated with him. They have chosen this. But it's also an MRI of the entire Trump movement. Arguably an MRI of Donald Trump, the man. It's also, as the Daily Beast reports, quote, political suicide, because taking a wild racist swing at Latino voters, every Puerto Rican voter in the country 8 days out from Election Day, quote, will almost certainly alienate more voters who might have voted for Trump. And it is hard to imagine that it has earned him one single new vote. By all measures, a moronic political strategy, which leaves one explanation. One, maybe he's not trying to win, and also this is who he is. It's also important to tell you today that this exact location does have echoes in history, in our country's history, its ugliest chapters. Later in the program today, we're going to be joined by legendary documentary filmmaker Ken Burns, and you might remember his three-part series on the U.S. and the Holocaust. It included footage from the now infamous pro-Nazi rally in 1939 at Madison Square Garden.
No group was more adamantly opposed to admitting Jewish refugees than the German-American Bund. 20,000 members would fill Madison Square Garden on Washington's birthday. They were led by Fritz Kuhn, a German immigrant who fancied himself the American Führer.
What we are actively fighting for under our charter. First, a social, just, white, Gentile, ruled United States.
White, rule, of the U.S. Got it? So the location, the message, white rule of the United States. The parallels are right there in front of all of us. It's where we start today with some of our favorite experts and friends. Democratic Congressman Richie Torres is here of New York. With me at the table, co-host of MSNBC's The Weekend, Alicia Menendez is here. And former RNC spokesman, host of the Bulwark podcast, MSNBC political analyst Tim Miller is here. Congressman, I start with you. Your thoughts?
Look, Donald Trump's rally was a buffet of bigotry. I mean, if you're a bigot, you had all you could eat. You had racism and sexism, anti-Semitism and nativism. But for me, the so-called joke from the so-called comedian was not the disease, it was a symptom. The disease is Donald Trump. There's no one in our politics who's more corrosive and more divisive. And to your point, Donald Trump cannot distance himself from the hatred of those comments because he has spent his whole career stoking the flames of hatred and fear. Like, Donald Trump is not a firefighter, he's an arsonist who's intent on burning down anything resembling decency and civil discourse in our politics.
Whatever happens in a week, how do we move on from what we saw last night?
It's hard to know. I mean, we have to, you know, Donald Trump spoke of liberation. We have to liberate ourselves from Donald Trump because he is a deep rot at the very soul of our country. I mean, that rally was demagogic politics at its most despicable and its most dangerous. And he cannot help but be hateful. You know, expecting Donald Trump to be anything other than hateful is like expecting a circle to have three sides, right? Hatred is core to who he is and always will be and always has been.
Alicia?
The purpose of language like that, what we heard at that rally, yes, is to whip up hatred and discord. It's also for those of us who come from these communities and these cultures to disempower us. And so I think it is important to remember as they attempt to do that, just how much power Latino voters and Puerto Ricans have. I'm thinking specifically of Pennsylvania, largely because it is well poised to be the tipping point state, because it is a state where you have Latino representing about 5% of the electorate. Half of that 5% is Puerto Rican, right? So, yeah, folks on the island may not be able to vote for president, but their cousin and their aunt who lives in Pennsylvania.
And their husbands and wives and best friends. I mean, the idea that it doesn't affect all of us is also wrong.
Correct. And the tell was, one of the #1 rules of Trumpism is you never apologize, you never say you were wrong, you never disavow. And what did we see? We saw the Trump campaign trying to distance itself. You can't distance yourself from a speaker that you invited in and then allowed to continue on stage. To your point about they loaded up the comments in the prompter. They knew what they were getting. But you also saw members of Congress, Congressman Salazar, who has a competitive race in Florida. You have Senator Rick Scott trying to distance himself from this because they understand the power of this community and the power of this vote.
Tim.
Yeah, well, in addition to what we already learned about how they put it in the teleprompter, so we shouldn't even have to do this, my colleague Mark Caputo is just reporting just now that they actually cut a couple of his jokes. He had a joke in there that was going to call the vice president the C word. So they did vet it.
Oh, you know what? Elon had taken care of it. His PAC put that out.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, Elon's PAC put a C word. Well, I think the joke was going to actually say the whole word, where Elon's PAC's ad just calls it the C word. Pretty gross stuff. I would say here's the other thing to their statement, right? They're like, this doesn't represent who we are or whatever. Obviously nonsense, but it's just worth stating. Donald Trump Jr., after that speech, was retweeting and posting about how great that guy is with the terrible jokes. But more than that, Stephen Miller, who will be, I think, maybe the most influential advisor in the second Trump term, said during his remarks, America is for Americans and Americans only, which has a lot of 1939 echoes, for starters, and which is also kind of strange at a speech that featured Elon Musk from South Africa and Donald Trump's wife as well, who's not from America. A couple of them aren't. And but more than that, it's like, no, actually, that is the core message. The guy's joke is also the campaign's message, just like slightly less crudely. It is, you are not one of us, you are not welcome, you are lower than us. This is not, we're in New York City. You could have given a big speech at Madison Square Garden about Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty and how great this country is and how it's only in America that this could happen, that a businessman from Queens, blah, blah, blah. You could have given that speech, but they didn't. They gave a speech that was America's for Americans and Americans only. It included racist jokes targeting Puerto Ricans and blacks, and other one Latino joke that was so gross you couldn't even show it on here. So
yes, I was trying to think about how to paraphrase it, and you could not.
Go ahead and give us a description of
about how we love to have babies because we don't understand how to control our own fertility, which is somehow parallel to the ways in which we enter this country.
I'm going to need the Cliff Notes. Congressman, let me show you some of the interview that really roiled the Trump campaign last week. And our measure of that is to take a peek at local news, not just in the battleground states, but across the country. And the story of the Kelly tapes, four-star General John Kelly's on-the-record interview, the first time ever, talking about Donald Trump meeting every technical definition of a fascist, is certainly a story that has broken through. Let me play that for you.
Looking at the definition of fascism, it's a far-right, authoritarian, ultranationalist political ideology and movement characterized by a dictatorial leader, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition, belief in a natural social hierarchy. So certainly, in my experience, those are the kind of things that he thinks would work better in terms of running America. He's certainly an authoritarian, admires people who are dictators. He has said that. So he certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, for sure.
I guess my question, Congressman, is at what point are we at a tipping point, in your view, in the minds of the voters and the American people, and certainly your constituents?
Look, there was one sense in which the rally was a public service. It was a revelation of who Donald Trump is. You know, the electorate has short memories, and I often worry that people forget just how corrosive and how destructive he can be. And the rally was a reminder that he is every bit as destructive and divisive as he's ever been, and he will never improve. And American politics has to be liberated from Donald Trump and the corrosive influence that he has on our discourse and our politics. And there's no question in my mind that Donald Trump has fascistic tendencies. I mean, he openly celebrates strong-arm dictators. He openly celebrates the likes of Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin and Viktor Orban. So that's not speculation. That's based on what Donald Trump himself has said. And he aims to be a strong man in the image of those men.
Can I tie just a few threads together that I think you're trying to pull here, that it relates to the fascism, and then that sort of rhetorical question you asked about why I believe him about the deportations? Well, on 60 Minutes last night, as this rally was going on, you had Cecilia Vega do an entire bit about this deportation plan, what it's going to cost, how you actually execute it. And you have Tom Homan, who was the acting director of ICE under Trump, saying, well, we can do it because we've done it before. And when Cecilia says, well, how can you guarantee that that doesn't then lead to family separations? He says, well, we can deport the entire family. So to your point about Stephen Miller, Donald Trump may not be in the weeds on how he is operationalizing all of his fascist plans, but he has people behind him who are very happy to allow him to either win an election or, I know we'll talk about it in a little bit, make a secret side plan and promise